The Bible says rest. The culture says hustle. Our pastor says give God our all. Our boss says give the company your all. And social media tells us that if we're not grinding, we're losing. And then somewhere in the middle of all that noise, our body is screaming and nobody's listening. I'm a therapist and a minister, and today I want to trace how the theology of rest got hijacked by the theology of production. Because what's driving your exhaustion might not be your schedule, it might be your theology. In the ancient world, rest was sacred. Sabbath wasn't just a day off, it was an act of trust. People stopped working because people believed God would provide even when they weren't producing. I want to pause there for a moment. You believed that God would provide even when you weren't producing. What a thought. Rest was a theological statement, a statement that understood that I am not God, that God is the one who supplies my needs. The world does not depend on my effort. I can stop and it will keep turning. But somewhere along the way, our culture flipped that. The Protestant work ethic took over. Hard work became proof of God's favor, and productivity became a spiritual discipline, and rest became suspicious. The person who rests must not be serious about God. The one who sets boundaries must not really be committed. The one who says, I cannot do that this week, must not love the church or the company enough. And the culture reinforces it also. Hustle culture, grind culture, rise and grind. It's the same message in secular clothing. Your worth is your output, your value is your productivity. Have you ever heard this statement? I will rest when I'm dead. So now we get the same message from the pulpit, from my podcasts, from my news shows, from many different places. You are what you produce. And if you stop producing, you stop mattering. That goes against what God said, because God said we are fearfully and wonderfully made, and we are made in God's image. And because of that, we have worth and value just because. So let's talk a little bit about what the Sabbath actually was for. In the Exodus context, Sabbath was given to people who had just been freed from slavery. I want us to think about that. These people have been forced to produce bricks without straw 7 days a week with no breaks. Their value to their society was their labor, and their identity and safety depended on their output. Pharaoh's system, in other words, was the hustle culture for Israel. And the first thing that God does after liberating Israel from Egypt is command rest. Not as a reward, but as reprogramming. God is telling them you are no longer slaves. You don't have to produce in order to be worthy. Your value is not your output. And I'm giving you a day to remember that you are human beings and not human doings. That's something we have to remember. We are human beings, not human doings. We have value, and it's not based on what we produce, but on being part of being God's image. Sabbath is resistance. It's a weekly act of defiance against every system that says your value is your productivity only. Every time you rest, you're saying that, hey, I'm not Pharaoh's, I'm not the churches, I'm not the companies, I am God's. And God says, rest. But the church took that revolutionary act and turned it into another obligation. Sabbath became go to church, which is another form of production for a lot of people, especially faithful people. Because faithful people are serving, singing, volunteering, ushering, greeting, teaching, performing, working in so many areas. And I like to say that's not rest, that can be a shift change. I often have to talk to pastors about this and say, you know what? Sunday is not your day off. Sunday, you are working. You need to find another day to have Sabbath because Sunday is actually part of your job. Those who are volunteering in ministries also may need to understand that you're spending a lot of time building and helping a ministry. That's a wonderful work. You're changing lives, but also your body needs rest at times. It needs Sabbath. Let me tell you what happens when we ignore that design. Our bodies start to break down. Chronic stress without recovery produces inflammation, immune suppression, adrenal fatigue, sleep disruption, and a nervous system that forgets how to downregulate. We end up in permanent fight or flight mode, and our body is begging for rest, and our theology is telling it to be quiet. I say this is even more important for people as they get older because our bodies don't recover as quick. So taking that Sabbath time is actually more important. When we don't take Sabbath, relationships deteriorate. I've heard many marriages where one spouse or the other felt like they were in competition with the church. The person living at max effort has nothing left for the people closest to them. We give our best to our jobs, to our churches, to our ministries, and our spouse gets the leftovers, our children get the leftovers, and actually we get the leftovers too. And then we wonder why we feel disconnected from the people we loved. Wonder why our relationships suffer. Wonder why we have a loss of energy or feel depressed or something else. Our faith can become mechanical and lose its joy when we don't take Sabbath. When everything becomes obligation, then nothing is worship. We're going through the motions because stopping feels like sin, but the joy has left a long time ago. And we're no longer worshiping, we're performing out of obligation. And we can be so deep in that performance that we forget what a genuine encounter with God actually feels like. That's the cost, not just the tiredness, the loss of health, connection, loss of the very faith that the effort was supposed to prove. So let me say something that you may have never received before. Take time to rest. Take time to rest. Not to be lazy, not to abandon your responsibilities, but take time to be human. Take time to have limits. Understand that all of us have limits. Take the permission to say, not this week, without feeling like that you failed God. You're not a machine. You were not built to run without stopping. The God who designed you with a need for rest and then commanded it. Just in case you tried to override the design, which we often do as human beings, and it cost us. Rest is not the opposite of faithfulness. Rest actually is faithfulness. It's trusting God enough to stop. And it's believing that the world will keep turning, even if you sit down. It's an act of faith and not a lack of faith. Next week, I'm going to get practical. How do we actually stop performing faith and start practicing it? Because knowing we need rest and knowing how to rest are two different skills. And most of us were never taught how to rest. Subscribe so you don't miss.